Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Smith. I'm a Bristol graduate and I currently work at ITV as an assistant commissioner in entertainment. Before we get going, I'm just going to go over a bit of housekeeping. So today we're going to be chatting about media. We've got myself and a couple of other guests who are going to be speaking as well. We've got Shamila Chowdhury, Gary Rosewell and Nick Salon. So we'll get on to them in a little while. But first of all, just a few bits of housekeeping. So this is Bristol Connect's live event. This online series will provide you with career insights from fellow graduates and give you the opportunity to ask questions which could help you to further or change your career. So today's event is going to focus on careers within media, and myself, Shamila, Gary and Nick are here to provide you with career insights and to answer some questions. So just these few bits of housekeeping. You can use the Q&A tab throughout the talk to ask questions, which we'll get to at the end of the presentation. We'll cover as many questions as we can during our allotted time, but if we do run out of time, then just email us at alumni-events@bristol.ac.uk and we'll endeavour to answer any remaining questions via email. Please only use the Q&A tab to ask questions. Any comments or technical issues should be emailed to us. The chat function is disabled on this event. Gareth Hughes, the University of Bristol Graduate Careers Consultant, is on the Q&A function and will be able to answer any careers related questions. So just to let you know, we're all volunteers and the views and opinions we're sharing with you today are our own personal opinions and do not reflect the views or opinions of any associated organisations or the university. This session is being recorded and you will receive an email link to the recording after the event. If you have any technical issues during the presentation, try exiting the Zoom meeting and re-entering. And if that doesn't work and you continue to have problems, then please email alumni-events@bristol.ac.uk. So that's the boring bit out of the way. So let's get going. I suppose I'll start off by just giving you a little bit of a background about myself and how I've ended up in a career in the media. So I studied law at Bristol. I graduated in 2000 and I suppose it was about 6 months into my law degree that I realised that I didn't want to be a lawyer. So could be argued as a slightly unwise choice of degree. But I thought, you know what, I really enjoy the course and I didn't know what else I wanted to do. So I thought I'm going to carry on and finish it. So I did, and I did find it really, really useful. And in hindsight, I did pick up skills that I used in later life. I think the point when I realised that I didn't want to be a lawyer was everyone was talking about their training contracts that they were applying to and which magic circle law firm they wanted to join. And I just thought, this sounds just like it's not me. I didn't want to be tied to a desk. I didn't want to be wading through loads of documents. I just thought there's got to be something that grabs me a bit more. So I finished my degree, still didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I went to Argentina and decided to teach English for a year because it felt like something that would be quite fun and also give me a bit of time just to sort of think what other kind of area might I like to go into. Now, around this time, it was just when the reality series Big Brother started. So it started in 2000. And I remember watching it and thinking, I'm absolutely fascinated by this. This is amazing. I watched every single episode and continued to watch it for years to come. And I thought, there's a seed was planted, I guess. And then I started to think, well, if someone must work on this show, it must be someone's job. So why can't I be the one that works on it or a similar show? So I started to think about how I could make that happen. And the easiest way I thought to make it happen was to do a bit of research, find out who made it, which is a company at the time called Endorse. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to write to them. So I sent them an email and surprise, surprise, they didn't respond because I'm sure loads of people were sending the same email. So I went online and found as many names of production companies as I could. And I bombarded them with my CV. And at the time, there was nothing relevant on my CV. I had a law degree and I had done sort of summer jobs, but there wasn't anything media related. But I thought sooner or later someone's going to give me a shot. And in the end, the show that gave me an opportunity was BBC Crime Watch. So they gave me unpaid work experience for 2 weeks. And I thought, I've got this sorted. I'm going to go in, and with my law degree, I'll impress them because I know how that all works. But actually, I made the tea. I made the tea for 2 weeks, and then I bought some props for crime reconstructions. And that was my job. And I loved it. Even though I was making the tea, I really, really enjoyed it. So then I thought, okay, well, now I've got something on my CV. It's not a proper job. It was only work experience, but at least I had something relevant to put on there. And then I went back to Endemol and said, hey, look, now I've got something on my CV. Can I have a job? And they gave me one. So it all sort of stemmed from there. I worked at Endemol for a couple of years as a freelancer. And then slowly but surely, it's one of those careers where the more jobs you get, the more doors open for you and the better your CV looks. And if you do a good job, then hopefully you'll sort of progress along. So I worked as a freelance. First of all, I was a runner, which literally involves running around, making sure that the rest of the production team is all sort of working properly. Lots more tea making. And then I slowly worked my way up through being a researcher, an assistant producer, a producer, and a series producer. And I was working on sort of mainly entertainment sort of shows. So I worked on things like Strictly Come Dancing, Come Dine With Me, Children in Need, Dancing on Ice, and Love Island. So I really enjoyed it. It's really varied, loads of different exciting things to do, sometimes working abroad in Mallorca for Love Island and that sort of stuff, and often in studios all around the country. And yeah, it was fantastic. And then recently I've moved into a staff job at ITV where I'm now an assistant commissioner. And what that involves is I get given a slate of programmes to look after. So I have to make sure that they're kind of editorially running in the right direction, make sure that they don't spend too much money, and make sure that the finished product is of a standard high enough to go onto ITV. Then the other part of the job is people pitch ideas to me for new shows. So they may, it could be anything, mainly in the world of entertainment, but it could be a reality show, it could be a singing or a dancing show, a quiz, a game show, that sort of stuff. So that's how I've ended up where I am. And then I thought it might be useful just a few kind of things I've learned along the way, which might be useful for any of you guys who are thinking of a career in TV. Or, I mean, it could extend out to general media as well. I would say the most important thing for me is pick a genre that you're passionate about. So if you love sport, then zero in on sports broadcasting. If you love children's TV, then go for that. I think that's the key thing. It's work out what you like the most, because you're going to be spending a lot of time talking about it and a lot of time watching it. And if you don't like it, you're not going to enjoy your job. What I find amazing is the amount of people that come to me for interviews or looking for work, and they're like, oh yeah, I'd love to work at ITV. And I'm like, oh, okay, what ITV shows do you enjoy? There's a deathly silence. And they're like, oh, I don't really watch TV. And I'm like, well, then you've come to the wrong place. Like, only apply for a job somewhere if you actually care about it, because it starts to become quite obvious quite quickly if you're not really passionate about the particular area. Other things, I suppose, that are really useful to consider is it's a really competitive industry. And I think anything that you can add to your repertoire of skills is really, really handy. So even if you're not working as in a full-time role, there's stuff that you can be doing in your own time. So depending on the genre that you want to get into, you can learn how to use a camera and you can film. You know, you can get really cheap handy cams. It doesn't have to be excellent quality or really expensive, but you can get out there and start filming stuff. Start filming your friend's 30th birthday. Start filming your cousin's wedding. Start just getting out there and working out how to film and perhaps edit as well. You know, some of the packages you can get, you can edit at home. And if you pick up skills like that, that's going to be really, really useful. And it shows a bit of passion and enthusiasm as well. Don't expect to enter at a high level. I think sometimes I was a victim of this. I thought, well, I've got a degree from Bristol, like I'm pretty special. And I thought that I'd be going into sort of some kind of quite well-paid job, loads of benefits, you know, well done me. But actually it doesn't work like that. You need to start at the bottom and you need to learn your craft and work your way up. And if that involves making the tea for 6 months, then that's what you've got to do. And often when I worked in production, if people couldn't be bothered to put in the work and make tea for 6 months, and some other tasks as well, but it kind of proved that they didn't have enough dedication to me. So we actually use that as a bit of a filtering system. So it's always worth kind of like just considering that you're going to have to put in a bit of work before you can get anywhere. I'd say do your research with the companies that you think you might like to work for. It's all online. It's really easy. If you see a show that you like, or a type of media that you're interested in, find out who works there, get their email address, email them direct. That's, in my experience, how you can break through that seemingly impenetrable wall of how am I ever going to get a job in this world. I think it's worth being aware that it can be a really antisocial career. I'm sure Shamila, who's going to speak in a second about wildlife programming, will back this up. You have to work weekends. You might have to miss your friend's birthday party. It's not a 9 to 5 desk job. You don't get to just leave at 5 and then you're done. And the rewards are massive. Like it's super fun. It's exciting. It's challenging. It's really, really varied. But it's not a normal 9 to 5 job. So the sooner you kind of get to grips with that and accept that, the better. And if a very stable job is what you're looking for, then media might not be the best route for you, I would say. And then finally, if you do get an opportunity, whether it's work experience or being a runner, I'd say turn up on time, be positive, be really helpful, try not to complain too much. And try and be the sort of person that is so useful and positive to have around, that the people that work there want to keep you on, because ultimately there's a big queue of people who also want to work in media, and you need to give them a reason for you to stay and to get your foot in the door and build your experience. And I think if you don't come into it with a really upbeat, positive attitude, then it's going to be tough to sort of break in. But once you do break in and you prove that you're keen and that you're up for a challenge and that you've got the skills that can be developed, then it's a fantastic industry to be in. It's super varied. I don't think I've ever really been bored at work, which is when you get to my age, and that's quite an amazing thing, I think, because a lot of my friends from Bristol who went into careers that they perhaps didn't feel massively passionate about have that kind of Sunday evening dread of turning up to their job on Monday morning, whereas I can truthfully say that I haven't really had that. So I think I'm pretty lucky in that respect. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be questions that will come through later on. But that's it from me for now. So what I'll do now is just to introduce you to Shamila Chowdhury. Shamila is a producer-director at Humblebee Films. So Shamila has been making natural history programmes for over 20 years and has been involved in many of David Attenborough's projects. She started her career at the BBC and has experience in big landmark productions as well as live shows. So I will say over to you, Shamila.
Thank you, David. I have to say, you've just said it all in your spiel. You have given an excellent overview of probably the best way to get into the industry. It is a very hard industry to get into. All of the media is, and wildlife filmmaking is just the same. There's a long queue of people wanting to work in that industry. And it can be daunting because there isn't one set path of getting into it. Just as David said, there are lots of different routes in, and that can be tricky. But at the same time, that's liberating because whatever you've studied at university, you can use that as a stepping stone to getting it into the media. But the one thing that I think everybody that I know has in common, everyone I know has had a different path, a different journey that took them into the industry, but they all had some things in common. And one of those that David's already mentioned repeatedly is passion. You have to have a passion for it. You have to have persistence, and you need to be able to grab every opportunity that you get. So don't be afraid. your journey will be a unique one. Your career will be a journey if you want to get into the media. It won't be a beginning and an end as such. It will be a journey, but every step will take you one, further, and will enrich and be valuable. And just enjoy the ride. My own journey started back here at Bristol University when I was an undergraduate, and it started with an encounter, a chance encounter that I had with someone who gave me some advice that I took very much to heart. And that person was David Attenborough. And I, like many of you, watched his films as a child and was fueled with a passion for the natural world. And all I wanted to do from that point onwards was make natural history films, but I didn't know how to get into the industry. So I took a biology degree at Bristol, and I have to say most wildlife filmmakers do have biology degrees, so it's a very useful degree to take. And in my first year, David Attenborough happened to give a talk at the Colston Hall, and I managed to secure a ticket to the event, and I was very excited, very naive, and I thought I'd won the golden ticket to the wildlife filmmaking industry. I knew I wouldn't meet the man, but I thought I'd write him a letter and pass it on to the staff at Colston Hall and ask him to give it to him. But when I got there, the bouncer, much to my horror, took me backstage through the dark corridors and deposited me at the green door, the green room door. And I knocked. David Attenborough opened and looked as surprised as I was. But I gave him my letter, and he very kindly suggested that maybe we talk after the show was over. So I waited afterwards, and another hour whilst he signed hundreds of books. And after everybody had left, we talked. And I told him how much I wanted to work in the industry, and was there anything I could do to help him on any of his projects. He was very kind, but very honest. And he said, that's not really going to be possible. And he suggested that I should finish my degree and get a good solid foundation in biology and natural history, and then try to get a job at the BBC Natural History Unit. It was very sensible advice. He was absolutely right, but I was devastated and took it very badly at the time. So I finished my degree, and I went on to do a doctorate at Oxford, and worked on birds. And my research took me to the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust up at Slimbridge, which is just outside Bristol. It took me to Scotland, where my birds wintered, and in the summers it took me to the Arctic, to Norway and Spitsbergen. And I had a wonderful time. I loved it. In many ways, the work is not dissimilar to wildlife filmmaking. So I learned how to live in extreme environments, how to set up trips to these remote locations, how to present my research to other colleagues or to the public. And I had a great time. I learned a lot. And when the Wildfowl Trust offered me a job afterwards, I took it, and I worked in conservation for about 3 years. And after about 3 years, I saw a job advertised by the BBC Natural History Unit. They were looking for, they were starting a new series called The Life of Birds with David Attenborough, and they were looking for a researcher to help them find the stories and locations for filming. And that was literally as if someone had rung a bell, and I thought, that's the job I've been waiting for. I seemed to have the right background and skills for it. I knew about science and scientists working on birds all around the world. I knew of the latest discoveries. I didn't have any television experience at all, but I really, really wanted that job. So I made a difficult decision that day. I'd been saving up to buy a more powerful computer to do my research work better, but instead I went out and bought myself a new television, video player, and all of David Attenborough's films. And I took a week's leave from my job and immersed myself in this world. I watched the films. I thought, what would I do if I made a series about birds? I thought of a structure for the series, what topics I might cover, and what stories I might film. And I sent it all off to the BBC with my application. It was a huge feat of effort, but one I've never regretted. I got the job, and that was my foot in the door. from then it's very easy, as David already said. You essentially learn on the job. So I was lucky that was a long project, a 3-year project, and I learned how to be a television researcher rather than a scientific one. And I then went on to be an assistant producer, and so on over the years. And I also established a working and personal relationship with David Attenborough, which has continued to this day. So that was my journey, and my journey is just one journey, and it certainly isn't the best way to get into the industry, and it isn't the only way. But I will pass you on to Gary now, who will have his own journey to talk about.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to speak to David Attenborough. Incredible story there. Thank you for that, guys. I definitely relate to those stories, and a couple of words came up. I think passion, first of all. Both of you really clambered onto that. And it's such an important thing. If you really do focus your efforts and you're passionate about what you do, it just really helps the whole process, doesn't it? It just makes it that little bit easier. So my name is Gary Rosa. I'm founder of Sport 176. I have a really big one for job titles. So to break that down, what do? I'm a project manager in a freelance capacity in the world of global sports marketing. And that means that I manage projects for brands, rights holders, that might be teams, and sponsors and partners also, normally in the world of Formula One, where I've done that for a little over 10 years now. The reason why I went freelance, independent, is a little bit of a change of direction. I enjoy having other passion projects. So I started off very much focused on a full-time career and did that for a good stint of time for different businesses. And then as I evolved and my interest changed, and I think a lot of people's interest will change as we go through the pandemic at the moment, I wanted a little bit more of a freer and flexible way of working. So the normal way of doing that is working for businesses on a contract basis, and that will be for a certain period of time. And I might have a couple of clients ongoing at one period of time as well. So it's quite an exciting beast. It's very varied. I think as David alluded to, no one day is really the same. It's certainly not a 9 till 5. And you could be having many commitments over the weekend, working on various different projects as well. So just very briefly, to sort of simmer this down, how does the world of media relate to global sports business and Formula One in particular? Well, I think firstly, content production. Content production for sports business is absolutely huge. We're looking to open up the sport as much as possible. Nobody can really, well, unless you're very lucky, step into a Formula One car and go driving, whereas in football, you can pick up a football and play with your friends. So content production really allows us to open up what was previously considered quite a closed off world, so to speak, quite exclusive. And particularly with Generation Z coming in now, of which I'm sure many of the audience here are a part of, we want to bring you into the conversation, and social media allows us to do that with much of the content that we produce with the drivers. A brand like Petronas, for example, who I was managing last year, they'll have 8 appearances with Lewis Hamilton in one season. And the ability to have a driver of that caliber, someone of that fame, to endorse your brand, and potentially work with some of your colleagues at your business and entertain some of your guests is an incredibly huge brand building platform, and something that brands pay considerable money for, of course. Other than that, I've alluded already to social media. Social media links with content production, it's huge. Social media, when it came along, was a marketer's dream, as I'm sure Nick will allude to after me, because it's a central part of his role. But it allows brands to have a conversation with members of the public, and really draw them into brand perception. And that's just a huge rationale for brands coming on board in sport. So social media is absolutely huge for opening up the sport and maintaining that conversation. Thirdly, I'd also say journalist relations. Many brands come into sport because they may not have been known before. They might want to make a bit of a splash, product endorse. My first position was with ING Bank, a Dutch bank that were actually based in London back in 2008 and 9. And they were largely just not known before they joined Renault F1 team. When they did that, they became a title partner. They were across television screens. Even though they weren't winning, they were able to activate sports partnerships in a very successful way and really grow their brand exponentially, actually, and capitalize on that. So building relationships is a huge one. You might be entertaining journalists trackside, bringing them to your factory, explaining in person how the production process works of a Formula One car, meeting key personnel at the teams, with a view to that journalist then going away and writing an in-depth story on the experience that your brand has facilitated with the team and partner. So content production, social media, and I'd say journalist relations, three of the primary sort of media considerations, I'd say, with global sports business. Just a couple of words. I think, again, David alluded to a little bit of advice. What I'd say briefly is, be yourself in your career. It's one thing to chase different opportunities and just use your time as much as possible to chase those down. But don't lose sight of the fact that you do have a normal life as well. And, it's important to have a balance. I think when I was starting out, I was just so focused on my career that I sometimes lost sight of that. So it's really, really important to be yourself, stick to your values, and ensure you do take some time away from your office and pursuits as well. I'd also say do one thing at a time. That's probably the best advice I ever got from one of my colleagues. I know it's very difficult to do that in these very busy worlds that we live in with social media. We're forever interconnected, but try to focus your time very effectively. Particularly at the moment, if you are looking for roles, I completely sympathize. It's very difficult to do that at the best of times, not only during a pandemic, but focus those. Take some time to maybe write your ideas up on a whiteboard and really focus and simmer those down and try to focus on perhaps one or two of those top ideas and really pursue those. And again, be humble. Remember to be humble. Most of the positions in media will be behind the camera. You won't be the star of the show. You're going to be the one doing all of the running around and really making the star of the show the star of the show. That's our role. At least that's the way I see it in sports marketing. It is enjoyable. You're going to work with a lot of, you could be working with some really famous people, and it's really good fun. But you won't be the star of the show, and you're going to be the one doing the work behind the scenes. I think sports is extremely good for metaphors for the business world. And I enjoy reading around famous business people who can be really, really good examples of how to compose yourself in the real world. And I think Roger Federer is a fantastic example of that. Someone who is the best of the best at what he does. He really is the Mercedes of tennis. However, he remains modest and grounded. And you would never, ever perceive Roger Federer as being someone who's perhaps a little bit arrogant or stepping out of line at all. He remains very, very grounded, and I think that's a good lesson. And he also makes the difficult seem very easy. It's not. It's taken a lifetime of experience for him to do that, but a lifetime of work, sweat, sacrifice, and commitment. And it's very much the same in the corporate world as well. Apply yourself as much as possible. Go make that tea. Do everything you can to succeed in your role. Or, as Shamila was alluding to, make those connections. Go have the courage to go out and reach out to your heroes and have that discussion, because you never know where it's going to go. And in 10, 20, 30 years time, I think you'd be very proud looking back on that career and the early moves you made to make that a success. So just quickly, just stepping back, I realize we're quite limited for time. I did my undergrad in international business and French. Really enjoy speaking different languages, love getting out there and mixing up with different cultures. And that's benefited me in a lot of different career angles, breaking the ice with clients, introducing guests to the world of Formula One trackside, and generally just helping smooth relations. I did my master's at the University of Bristol, a fantastic course in international relations. International relations is grounded in sociology, which for me is the heart of marketing, and it really helped to get to grips with why and for what reasons people make the decisions that they do, because marketing ultimately is just all about people. I did go to both universities in Bristol, if I dare to mention that, the University of the West of England, doing my undergrad. And the difference between the two, I felt, when I was at the University of Bristol, was just the dynamism of the university and the people you were studying with. Everybody was heading in a forward direction, and it was very infectious. So you all knew that everybody was going to end up succeeding in some way, shape, or form, and you really fed off of that. It was a work hard, play hard environment, as I'm sure many of you have experienced already, and it was just a very important part of my sort of story, I guess. I'm very proud to say I'm still very good friends with a lot of people in London who studied on that course. My trade, just to boil that down, is integrated marketing. So using a variety of different disciplines in marketing, whether that be guest experiences, social media, content production, public relations, advertising, the whole cross-section of marketing to help grow a brand. And the last role I had, just to convey that, was as account director at an agency in Wimbledon, managing Petronas Motorsport with Mercedes. I would manage a small team to bring to life that partnership with Mercedes and essentially grow their brand and help sell more of their products and services. That's really what it comes down to in sports marketing. We can talk about media and social media and content production. Sales is what it really does boil down to. The old adage in F1 was race on Sunday and sell on Monday. And although that's not as obvious these days, it is still very accurate at the moment. In terms of big projects, I mentioned Petronas, also worked with Aston Martin, with Red Bull, Macmillan, actually a charity partnership involved in mass participation running, supporting events, mass participation hiking, actually, I think it was, which was another end of the spectrum that I actually really enjoyed. And currently I'm working with a company called Motorsport Engineer, and they're an e-learning platform for students to learn more about the world of motorsport engineering, assisting them with their content production, social media, and overall marketing strategy at the moment, essentially helping them to generate more business with students. A really exciting project to be working on at the moment. Just finally, to wrap up, a couple of pieces of sort of wisdom from my experience, I suppose. I know a lot of you have graduated now, but if you haven't already, again, passion is a key word here. You can gear your thesis or any form of practical task around your ambitions and your passions. I think that goes a long way to show that you are absolutely keen to get involved in the industry. And it helps so much if you go in an interview and you have a qualified opinion of what you're talking about, or you can pull out a project or your thesis or whatever it might be. It's just really useful. My internship interview in 2008 with ING, I think the interviewer might have just about been falling asleep, but as soon as I pulled out my thesis, and it was based on communications in global motorsport, it really opened the dialogue, and it really helped to open that discussion. Network. It's a difficult time at the moment, but people relations really do make the difference, particularly global sport. Once you're in, you're in. I think one of the guys has already mentioned that, but it really is about people networking. And if you aren't currently employed, please do get onto LinkedIn, make as many contacts as you possibly can, with an introduction, ideally, because that always helps to qualify the reason that you're reaching out. There are a lot of other potential freelance platforms that you can reach out to while you're looking for full-time work. Juno is very good for that. I think freelancer.com has some opportunities. I was actually reached out by Student Works yesterday, a gentleman who started up a business there, wanting to offer students who are currently enrolled or who have graduated opportunities to work on the side, supporting various different businesses. And I'm going to be looking into that over the next few days, because it would be great to have an extra pair of hands. Gear your hobbies and passion around what you love. Again, I think I've alluded to that already, but any other projects you have that you love, get invested in those, because it shows you have a qualified interest. Regarding Shamila, I actually have a passion for adventure travel as well. And that's something that in the future I'd love to get much more involved in. So I've created a travel blog. I regularly contribute editorials to that. Picking up as a bit of a hobby photography, just to see what I can do and dabble in that industry. And maybe that's something that you guys can pick up on at the moment as well, just in terms of side hustles. And lastly, I've got 5 P's here that the guys will all relate to. But passion, we've mentioned already. Patience. Nothing comes without hard work, and it doesn't come quickly. You have to spend a lot of time focusing on your ambitions and what you want to do, and it can take a long time to become established. So stay patient. It will happen. Perseverance, setbacks. Again, at the best of times, that's normal. Life is difficult, but at the moment, you probably will have more setbacks. But just keep focused. Do engage in other activities to keep your mind fresh. Exercise, I always find, is one of my personal lean-tos when I'm a little bit stressed out. Always really helps to refresh the mind and the body. So perseverance, stay focused on track, because you will get there eventually. People, again, with networking, just keep those people skills fresh. I think they really are underestimated in today's world, where we're all on social media. Engage with people as much as you can. Say hi to the bus driver in the morning. Say thank you. Be grateful as much as possible. Engage in dialogue with people. It's very important. And lastly, presentation. The art of selling oneself really cannot be underestimated. And whether that's the way you dress for an interview or the way you compose yourself and the way you articulate yourself, whatever it may be, bear in mind and be conscious of the fact that you are selling yourself. And potentially, when you all do become employed, you're going to be selling your business, products, services, their entire brand. You're going to be an extension of. So passion, patience, persevering to people, and presentation. And with that, I'll leave you for Nick to come on to next. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. I guess we're a little bit limited on time, so I'm going to run through my background super quickly, and then I'm just going to pull out 3 key themes that I think might be helpful to you, I hope will be helpful to you. So I graduated Bristol in 2001 with a politics degree, and really it was an incredible academic experience for me. I studied with a professor called Terrell Carver and Yutta Welds, and they really helped me and the class understand the connection between politics and popular culture, and that really got me involved in the TV industry in a very similar path to David. I joined the TV industry in a slightly different field, however, which was the buying and selling of TV reality formats. So the idea would be Big Brother was produced locally in maybe 40 plus countries around the world. I was the person that would do the deal with the broadcaster or the production company outside of the UK. And it was very much a deal-based, contract-based, sales-based role within the TV industry. I found that during my time in TV, I didn't have a good sense of how the business was changing at a very macro level. And so I decided to do an MBA at London Business School to get a better handle on that. And then I came to the United States because I saw that the market opportunity for media was really, really big. There was a lot of change happening in the industry when I got here. That was in 2010. And I joined a very, very controversial startup that streamed all the live broadcast TV channels on the internet and made them available on your mobile phone. That company was sued. It was actually a company that was deliberately going to be sued. It built a very elaborate solution to withstand a legal challenge, and it went all the way through to the Supreme Court of the United States. The company lost. Everyone lost their jobs, and I, from that experience, went to work at another startup at the time called Periscope that had just been acquired by Twitter. So Periscope is and was an interactive live streaming platform. It was kind of very central to Twitter's video efforts. And from Periscope, I transitioned to a role at Twitter where I was doing media deals for news programming on Twitter. So bringing journalistic organizations, news organizations like BuzzFeed News, and having them create shows, create video content for Twitter, and then try and help them make money from that. And I guess that's where I am today. I run news partnerships for Twitter. I help Twitter think about how to engage with and how to manage the major news organizations in the United States. And I guess the 3 things that I wanted to really focus on and that I think have been particularly helpful in my career in media is one point that David touched on, which is know what you want to do. I would take that a step further and say be as specific and narrow about where in the industry you want to work as possible. And, to give you an example of this, when I was at the startup area that was sued and that was, ultimately shut down, I found that from being at a startup and, having access to this extraordinary amount of data to understand how programming and consumption was doing, I found this kind of niche for myself, which was to present and position myself as a data-driven content acquisitions expert, somebody that could look at potential programming and understand from the data and from the database, how to evaluate that program, whether consumers might be interested in that programming, etc. And that positioning was very unusual at the time, but was exactly what companies like Netflix and Amazon were looking for, because they wanted people that could look at this vast trove of data to make content decisions. During that process, I was offered a job at Amazon to work in their video business, but I decided that Twitter was more entrepreneurial. But being narrow in my focus, and actually throughout my career, narrowing my focus has been really, really important. The second thing that I want to talk about and just mention is that, media is a very broad industry. And while there are great opportunities to go and work in production, producing programming or commissioning programming, there are also a lot of opportunities to help the media industry make money, and in the business side of the media industry. So there are opportunities to help large companies like ITV even chart their strategic direction. How does ITV think about the new landscape where emerging media businesses or media technology businesses like TikTok are fast growing? How does ITV position itself and differentiate itself? What does the future look like? How does ITV sell its own programs to advertisers, to consumers through marketing? So there's a huge breadth of the industry, and figure out kind of what it is that really interests you. Do you want to be closest to the creative part of the industry? Do you want to be doing transactions where you're actually trying to raise money or trying to chart the course? And that thinking will help you be super specific. And then the third thing to say is, and this may strike some as controversial, but I think it's important. I believe that the traditional media industry is facing huge systemic challenges. And I think that the media industry is in the process of being consumed by and/or integrated into tech and into the tech industry. And I think that when you look at audience consumption numbers, and you see that when you look at the 65 plus age group, they spend the majority of their time watching television. As you get younger and younger, that mix decreases their TV consumption and blends with social, where people are getting their media experience from social platforms, from Twitter, from TikTok, from Instagram, etc., and also from gaming. And so the final thing I would say is future-proof your plans. Think about not just what you want to do, but where is this part of the industry going to be in 5 years? Because you're going into the business and you really want, a 10-year, 20-year career in the media business, and you don't want to be going into companies that are going to be potentially doing layoffs in a year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. The best place to be in the media industry is in a company or a space where there's going to be continued growth. So that's kind of how I would think about it. Be super specific and narrow. Think about the media not just as the creative development of content, but think about it as a broad industry that touches and is in some way integrated with technology, and future-proof your plans. Think about where is the industry going, and how can you position yourself so that when it goes that way, you are ahead of the rest. I hope that's helpful. So David, I think handing back over to you.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks, Nick. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A section. So there's a Q&A function which you can submit questions to. Just having a quick look now. There's a good question, I think, here from Giannina Dweck. And Giannina says, there seems to be a cycle of not being able to get work experience because you don't already have work experience. When I've tried applying for runner positions, there have always been candidates with more experience, and so I've had no success. Even learning new transferable skills to boost my CV and talking about relevant projects in cover letters doesn't seem to help break the cycle. Any advice on this? Shamila, do you think you might be able to help Giannina with this
Yes, absolutely. I think when it comes, there's two different things here. There's work experience, and I think what you're talking about is a runner job as well. So work experience, you should be able to get whatever your level of experience is. We regularly take people who are graduates, newly out, haven't got any experience. Obviously, if they have some sort of skills, whether it's photography as a hobby, or travel, or diving, it shows that they have a genuine interest or aptitude for, say, wildlife filmmaking in my case, and they will stand out slightly. But getting a 2-week work placement is not impossible for anybody, I don't think. And they are limited because companies can't take on that many. It takes time to introduce a work experience person to the job, and to keep them occupied and let them benefit from it. So there won't be many, but if you are persistent, I think you will get one, and you shouldn't really be losing out to people with more experience. When people come with more experience to us, we would not take them on as a work experience placement. We would be looking to see if we could give them a starter paid position. The work experience placements are hugely beneficial. I would absolutely encourage you, like David, you made your first start through that, and that is the most common way most young people get into the industry. I think it helps you to make contacts, to start networking, and essentially we are a business that operates around people. We like to work with people that are friendly, that are nice to work with. That's as important as the actual technical skills or other things you come with. So during the work experience placement, it's short, but you have the time to show that you are passionate, that you're willing to do anything, that you're a nice person to work with. And if a small opportunity comes up, a runner position for a few weeks or months, a researcher position, a field assistant, you may well be in the position to be offered that first.
That's great, thank you, Shamila. Now, Bella Spratley's got a kind of a related question. Nick, I thought maybe you might be able to help with this. So she asks, how do you balance unpaid internships or runner work, or similar sort of entry-level roles with financial needs? At what point should I expect to be paid? Nick, I don't know what it's like in your sort of area, but how do you, is there a point when people who are just starting out need to put their foot down and say, do you know what, I'm not doing unpaid work experience anymore, I want to find a paid position? How do you think that works?
Sure. I mean, I think that, to my point about how the industry is changing, tech companies are particularly generous in how they think about those things, and Twitter will not hire people without paying them. So internships are paid, and they're paid quite well. So I think that the first thing is there are paid internships out there, and not every company has them. I mean, I would judge it by the extent of the impact that you're making. I think that, if you can see that your work is having a commercial impact on the company. So if, for example, I did an internship at a production company called Lion Television back in the day, and I was coming up with ideas, and those ideas were being developed, and I was adding development to them, and then they were being pitched to the broadcasters. There was a point at which it didn't really feel, and this wasn't specific to Lion, it felt like actually they were getting something out of it that tipped the scales from what I was getting out of it, in the sense that I was learning, of course, but also they were using my work for their benefit too. And I think that's really important. And I think that if you're connected to that, then it's important to start, asking. The only other thing I would say is always ask. When can I get paid? You don't have to suffer in silence. Just be honest, open, transparent. The sooner you ask, the better, because you're likely going to be less pissed off about being unpaid. And if it comes out in a way that feels entitled, or that you feel a bit angry about it, that may have the opposite effect. So, when you start an unpaid internship, say, well, what are your expectations? Typically, how long does the unpaid portion last? And set those expectations. The more you communicate clearly, the better, and you shouldn't be afraid to do so.
That's great, thank you, Dave. And interestingly, when I started, there wasn't really any limit to how long you could continue working unpaid. But now, in order to combat some of the, I mean, you could call it abuse, there is actually a limit. And I don't know, I should know, I don't know what the exact number of weeks is, but I think it's something around 2 weeks. So you're not allowed to employ people if they're actually, as Nick points out, if they're actually contributing and working, you're just not allowed to sort of keep people on unpaid. And that is in an effort to diversify the industry and to make sure that companies aren't kind of taking the mickey a little bit with how long they're getting free labour for. So hopefully that situation's got a bit better. But yeah, it is a bit of a tricky one. Okay, now
I was just going to add, just to chip in, sorry, on the first question about the endless cycle of not being able to find experiences. I would just encourage people to have a think about their USP. What is the real offering that you feel you can contribute to a business, and what's the value of you being there? And then try to convey that in your CV. Recruiters, I mean, they do this anyway, of course. It's going to be a few seconds to do your CV, unfortunately, because they're going to be so in demand, and even now. So try to make yourself stand out if you possibly can in your CV. Maybe you might even create something a little bit more interactive, and you have a dedicated website with your experiences and some photos of you on the job or something of that sort. Also, I think it is very difficult, of course, I know it goes without saying, but there are some industries that are booming. Online streaming, fast-moving consumer goods, the likes of Amazon, for example, home cooking, local stores, the cooperative. These all have booming media businesses. And just to say that there are some industries that I think are actually growing out of this, and within a crisis there can be new opportunities. So USP, thinking about your CV and making yourself stand out, and targeting business that might be benefiting during this period.
Thanks, Gary. And just a follow-up question for you, actually. So Sophie Davison asks, how is it best to build up contacts in the media industry? So, like, if someone finds you on LinkedIn or via other routes, like, does that bother you? Does it annoy you? Does it is that the best way? How would you recommend people sort of, if they're starting from nothing and they don't know anyone in the media, how do you build up the contacts?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say have a good profile to start with. Executives don't have that much time, so they're not going to have a lot of time to review things. They do review your profile, ensure that you have a good solid background there with your academics and any experiences that you do have. But I'd also say reach out with a cover note, very brief cover note, just explaining why you're getting in touch, very politely introducing yourself, and I'm looking to open some contacts for the future and really build my network. So give some context to it without just reaching out to people. But LinkedIn certainly is a very, very good way of doing that. I think, as we've all alluded to, being as proactive as possible and reaching out to businesses, potentially cold calling, emailing. If you really are passionate about it, don't be afraid to get in touch and attach your CV with that, or a link to your website and potentially constructed. Have a template email created, do some desk research and look at relevant businesses that might be able to assist you, and then get in touch with them. It's all about attacking from the front foot, I think.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, Anne O'Malley, this could be one for Shamila, actually. Anne O'Malley asks, is it worth taking a job in an area not of interest for the sake of getting a foot in the door of the industry? So imagine there's someone who loves natural history, can't get a job there. Should they be, just in order to learn something about TV production, perhaps taking or trying to find a job somewhere else? Shamila, what do you think about that?
Yes, absolutely. It's a delicate balance, but see it as an opportunity to gain additional skills. So you might be gaining skills in television that you haven't had before, and they'll be transferable skills. But if while filmmaking is something you want to be in ultimately, then don't stay too long making Big Brother or Love Island, because you won't have the right skills. So for a short period, yes, it's a good way because you are adding something to your CV, but don't stay in that position for long. And the same goes, to be honest, if you are entering straight into one genre, start as a runner, but don't get stuck in it. You have to keep moving on. So there's a cutoff period where if you stay too long, or if you stay too long as a camera operator, you won't be able to move across into becoming a producer and so on. So you do, I mean, you will find that out once you start in the industry, but any experience at the beginning is good experience.
Yeah, I'd confirm that's the same for my world as well. Nick, how about you? Does that sort of ring true to you as well? Is any sort of media experience better than mine?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, on the business side, and I'm primarily on the business side, the more varied experience, the better. Because you know, as you move into the later stages of your career, and as you're you're less likely to be overseeing a single individual business. As you move up in management, you're going to start to oversee diverse kind of businesses. And also, I would say it's important for, you know, to be able to judge and evaluate new businesses that are emerging. Like, for example, you know, when TikTok comes out, how do you start to sort of evaluate its potential success, you know, how it can scale, what its impact might be on the industry, etc. So I think on the business side, it's important to get a range of experience. And actually, I think there does come a point where if you stay in one single lane, you start to lose you know, some of your potency, and you start to narrow down on opportunities. I do understand that in media production, it can be much more specific, but I think it's important to see the media industry as a larger whole, and that production is just one component of a very large industry that does lots of things.
Brilliant, thanks, Nick. Now, Sophia Lewis asks, what advice could you give working class students trying to break into the media or journalism? What specific obstacles might they face? I can try and answer that. So it is really tough, and I think the toughest thing, especially with a lot of media roles, is that they're freelance. And what that means is that you don't have the security, assuming you manage to find a role, you don't have the security of being able to know that financially you can support yourself by, say, renting a flat for a year. Often in the world that I work in, you know, we have jobs, sometimes they're day jobs. You know, you're running for a day and that's all that you're guaranteed. Sometimes it's a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but it's very rare that we would ever have jobs that are guaranteed for a year. And that makes it really difficult because you know, potentially you don't have that financial backup from members of your family to bail you out if you need it. And that is really, really difficult. I think that's probably the biggest obstacle to breaking in. It may also be that, you know, you might suffer from a lack of contacts already. So there are certain people in the industry that manage to get in because their uncle works there. We're trying to change that, certainly in a lot of companies like where I work. You know, we're trying to diversify and make sure that it's not just one type of person that works in the industry. In terms of advice for it, it is really hard. I to some extent, I would say perhaps looking outside London can be quite useful. Some people think that, you know, going to London is where the streets are paved with gold, and that's where all the media jobs are. And actually, that's changing a lot now. There's a lot more regional hubs in, say, Glasgow, Manchester, Bristol, Belfast, Birmingham, and the living costs are cheaper. There's less competition for roles, and that can sometimes be a less scary prospect financially to sort of as a way to break in. I think in the past, perhaps there might have been a bit of snobbery involved as well in certain areas of the media. I don't work in drama, but I've heard that drama could be one world which perhaps, you know, was maybe a bit more difficult for working class people to break into. But I think that's changing, hopefully. So yeah, I think it's always going to be the financial aspect to it is going to be the toughest thing. And what is equally hard is because the roles are quite demanding with your time, you might not be able to take on a full-time second job to fund yourself, because that is also really difficult. So the way to get around that, I suppose, is to try and find weekend work, I suppose. We have that sometimes in entertainment TV production. You know, if you're working on Strictly Come Dancing, for example, like some people just work on the Saturday. And that's a way to kind of build up your CV a little bit whilst you're still earning in a you know, a temping job Monday to Friday. Shamila, have you got anything else to add to that at all about advice for working class students?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The finances is the issue, and there is huge instability in our field of work. I think probably the business side or tech side, as Nick said, is slightly better, but in production, you have to be prepared for a long haul of short-term contracts, big gaps. I mean, even now, I've been in the business for over 25 years, and I have months where, I'm freelance, I don't have work. So it is hard, and it's also a genre where it's not easy to support a family on your own. So think carefully about whether this is really something you want to get into. It is very, very rewarding and enjoyable and varied. There's never a dull moment, but it is hard financially.
Brilliant, thank you. Gary, Megan Denny asks, how would you say the current pandemic situation has changed the industry, especially for people looking for work experience or early careers opportunities? Have you got any advice on how we can adapt our approach?
So motorsport specifically. So I think the holy trinity in motorsport, or global sports really, is rights holders, so teams or federations, agencies who are in between partners and those rights holders, and then partners investing money into various rights holders. And for me, agencies have always offered the more pragmatic work experience option. Very grassroots marketing experience. You can get involved in different collaborative projects. Maybe you're going to be mind mapping different things. They have a lot more internship opportunities available. Events, of course, are not happening at the moment. It's very difficult in that respect globally. However, again, a crisis can breed new opportunities and new thinking. I think currently marketeers in sports are thinking towards more purpose-driven campaigns rather than more direct sales orientated campaigns. And also esports is a huge emerging area in global sports. So I'd suggest agencies out of the holy trinity, although there might be other opportunities elsewhere, they are still hiring. LinkedIn is still a very good place to search for roles, but I'd suggest agencies. CSM, Sport and Entertainment, Prism Sport and Entertainment, CAA, another good one. Just 3 examples. Please do feel free to reach out after the call if you want some other suggestions. But esports is a huge one. I'm having a couple of discussions there at the moment. A business called Gfinity. They host tournaments. They're going to be doing a lot more of those online. And it's just a huge emerging market. So I'd say beyond agencies, esports at the moment, just due to the movement of people and the fact that no events are happening, is a really, really good angle to look at the moment. And if you can steer your experience towards that and conveying that in your CVs, then that's a good move too.
Brilliant, thank you. And then Nick, well, actually, this might be useful for a couple of people to answer. Eve McGrady has asked about whether studying a master's, specifically for her in journalism, is a useful way into the industry. And Joanna also asks, is it necessary or beneficial to do a postgraduate degree for a career in media? Nick, do you mind starting us off on that?
Sure. I mean, I can speak to both journalism and business because I work with news organizations. I do have a sense for that. I mean, I think that in the US, a journalism degree and master's is very important, I think, for the print side, more so than the television side of news and journalism. I do think it's an important piece. I would just, to step back a second, I think that the master's piece is important from a vocational perspective insofar as can it help you get into an industry. But for me, it was really helpful from an intellectual perspective. And what I really got out of my business degree and what I think is available in all sorts of other degrees is really a framework for how to think about the industry and the future. What the trends are, what's happening, what the latest kind of academic thinking is. If you look at, say, journalism, I mean, there is the craft of journalism, but there are also these massive, massive challenges around trust in journalism, around what objectivity is, around how to deal with polarization in news, around the funding of journalism and the pressures that puts on you. Going and getting a degree is going to keep you connected to these things so that when you go into the industry, your eyes are wide open, and it will give you better tools and more information to come up with a really narrow, specific pitch so that you can see, well, actually, business and sports news is really increasing right now. There's a real appetite for it. There are too few star journalists, and there's much more leverage in that field. That will help you connect to those kinds of opportunities and help you be more specific. So I do think it's helpful. I think in some cases it's necessary, and you should do the research specifically for the job. But I would go into it, if you feel intellectually you'll get something out of it, as well as from a career point of view.
That's great, thank you. I mean, from my world of sort of entertainment TV production, I would say masters are not hugely beneficial. I mean, it's never harmful to have more knowledge about a subject, but for me, I see people coming with, undergraduate degrees, and actually you need to get in there and just start learning on the job for the most part. Shamila, I don't know how your world might differ slightly, because your world requires much more of a specific form of knowledge, doesn't it?
Yes and no. My journey is definitely not typical, and I wouldn't recommend anybody should go for a higher degree before starting in the media industry. You do not need it. That was my particular journey, and sometimes that can be beneficial to have more of a specialism. And I could imagine if you are a specialist in an area of history or something like that, and the BBC is making a documentary about the Egyptians, you might be the sort of expert that they were looking for. But those are very rare opportunities, and I had a very rare opportunity. I don't think you need it. I think it can be a hindrance sometimes to have a higher degree. You are older, you are less adaptable. A journalism degree was very much looked down on when I started in the industry. The sort of the media degrees, the wildlife filmmaking ones, there are 1-year master courses now all over the place. Bristol has them, London, Salford, but they now are actually coming through, and people are realizing the benefits of those, because you do get a background in all areas of television, from camera work to editing. It's a fairly superficial background, but actually these young people coming out today are so much more competent and versatile, because they can be used in these startup positions as a runner or as a young researcher. They can be used in various ways. So when I started, all I could do was I could find the scientific papers and the stories on the internet or something, but I didn't know how to touch a camera and be a second camera on a shoot, or film the behind the scenes making. I couldn't log the data, or I couldn't really do anything. I still can't do anything. So I do think there is a value in our industry to doing one of those courses, but not necessarily above getting experience or skills of other kinds. So you decide for yourself what you would enjoy most, or most beneficial for yourself. It can be just as valuable to spend a year volunteering with a conservation charity and being out in the field, learning how to work with animals in my area. And in yours, David, maybe other skills could be helpful. So I think anything that will add to your CV that is relevant to the media industry is useful, and a second degree is just one of those options.
That's great, thank you. And I think this might have to be our last question, but we can all sort of answer it. Jamie Dodd asks, so I will be moving to a city to pursue my career in media production. As I'll have to support myself from the off, I'm struggling to find roles directly in the TV industry. What non-media jobs will help me gain relevant experience while I'm applying for media industry roles? Gary, have you got any ideas on the kind of non-media jobs which could help people's skills develop?
Yeah, I think that's the key word. It's really people skills, isn't it? Just interacting with people on a daily basis, having those conversations, getting your confidence up. And when you do come across that final position in media that you want and love, that grassroots experience in whatever that might be. I mean, I've got colleagues at the moment who were furloughed, and they've actually gone back to working in the cooperative, for example, just to gain some short-term money and people skills experience before going back to things at the end of this year or next year. So it is a challenging period, but I think, again, being humble, one of those things we mentioned at the start, being able to gain experience, particularly people experience, before you go for those other roles is something that's really key. Just finding, in terms of more relevant skills that you could potentially do, try your hand at video editing. Maybe you can support, maybe have friends and family who work in a relevant area of the business, will they need support with social media or something other related to the industry? I think being proactive, leading from the front foot, and making yourself useful in whatever capacity, shape or form possible is really, really useful at this time.
That's great, thanks. And Nick, any non-media roles that you think will help sort of gain relevant experience?
Sure. I mean, I think anything in technology is really helpful right now. I mean, I think that, you know, media production is probably not as connected to the kind of technology world, you know, as some other media jobs. But I do think that thinking about data, understanding data entry, tables, how to tabulate data, you know, that's really, really important. Different softwares, you know, and just understanding how technology and communications work. That's going to help your understanding. And, you know, those two worlds are really converging at a pretty rapid rate.
That's great, thank you. And Shamila, anything from you about some sort of non-media jobs that might help?
Yes, I suppose for wildlife filmmaking, any jobs that directly work with animals or out in the wild, whether it's in the travel industry, conservation, science-related jobs, even gaining other skills like a diving qualification, other languages, all these are useful. So just try and think about what the genre you want to get into might find beneficial, and add that to your CV.
That's great, thank you. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time and we didn't quite get to all the questions, but just a reminder that the recording is going to be circulated afterwards, and if we didn't manage to cover your question, please email us at alumni-events@bristol.ac.uk and we will endeavour to answer them for you. The careers service is still here for you for up to 3 years after you finish your course, wherever you are in the world. Whether you know exactly what you want to do or you're just getting started, you can access benefit from careers guidance, feedback on job applications, interview practice, access to My Career, including the ability to book onto career service events, search for job vacancies and view hundreds of online resources. Also, if you've completed an undergraduate degree at Bristol within the past 12 months and a resident in the UK, you are eligible for an enhanced Bristol grad support package to help you get your career started, including one-to-one career support from a dedicated careers consultant who specialises in helping recent graduates. So log into My Career on the Careers Service website to find out more and to contact them directly. So thank you for everyone who attended, and of course to our speakers as well. And I hope you all have a good afternoon and good luck with your media careers. I'm sure you'll be absolutely fine once you get into it. Thanks, guys.